When Jessica and I decided to leave the hustle and bustle of New York City for a quieter life in the country, we thought we were doing what was best for us. We were newlyweds, and this small, charming town seemed like the perfect place to start our family. The house we found was almost too good to be true. An old Victorian with a sprawling backyard and lots of character. It had its quirks, but the price was right, and we were enchanted by its rustic charm. During the first week, as we were unpacking boxes and trying to make the place feel like home, a package arrived at our doorstep. There was no return address, just a small card attached to the top. I tore open the brown paper and found an old porcelain doll nestled inside. It was dressed in a faded lace gown, and its eyes seemed unusually lifelike, almost as if they were watching me. The card was handwritten, the ink slightly smudged, Quidem delicomo Eliquidara de voces. Translated, it meant, take care of her as she will take care of you. Jessica thought it was from her Aunt Cecilia, who had recently passed away and left her a few odd trinkets in her will. Despite feeling a bit uneasy about the doll, we decided to put it on the mantle in the living room. Jessica loved how it added a touch of vintage flair to the room. At first, I barely noticed it. The days were filled with moving furniture, painting walls, and getting accustomed to our new lives. But then, things started to change. It was subtle at first, shadows flickering in the corner of my eye, a cold draft passing through rooms where windows were tightly shut, and that doll always seemed to have shifted ever so slightly from where we left it. One night, as Jessica and I were relaxing on the couch, watching some late-night TV, a chill ran through the room. It was summer, and the nights were usually warm, but the air around us felt like ice. We brushed it off, attributing it to the house's old age. Then, a loud thud echoed through the room. We jumped, looking around frantically. The doll had fallen from the mantel, its glassy eyes staring up at us. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked it up, half expecting it to be broken, but it was perfectly intact. Jessica laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The following days were a blur of unease. Objects would move on their own. Small items like keys and remote controls seemed to vanish only to reappear in odd places. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. Jessica began having nightmares, vivid dreams where the doll's eyes followed her, whispering unintelligible words that would echo in her mind long after she woke up. She became more and more anxious, though she tried to hide it. I told myself it was just the stress of the move, the newness of everything playing tricks on us. One evening, as I was coming in from the backyard, I noticed small, childlike handprints on the window. I thought they were smudges from when we moved in, but they were inside the glass, trailing across surfaces we hadn't touched. I asked Jessica if she had noticed them, and she just looked at me with a blank expression, saying she didn't remember ever seeing them. But the look in her eyes told me she felt it too. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Desperate for answers, I decided to investigate the doll's origins. There was something about it, something dark that I couldn't ignore any longer. I searched online, diving into antique forums and obscure blogs dedicated to haunted artifacts. I didn't find much, just vague references to similar dolls from the early 1900s, all of them tied to eerie stories of misfortune and tragedy, but nothing specific about ours. I couldn't help but feel drawn to it, though, as if it held the key to everything happening around us. That night, Jessica found a hidden compartment in the base of the doll. Inside was a small, rusted key and a piece of paper with an address scribbled on it. We were both stunned, unsure of what it all meant, but we knew one thing for certain. This doll wasn't just a simple heirloom. It was part of something much larger, something that was starting to reveal itself in the most unsettling ways. As we sat there in the dim light of the living room, the shadows seemed to dance around us, and I felt a chill creeping up my spine. The doll sat on the table between us, its eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. It was as if it was silently urging us to uncover its secrets, daring us to understand the truth hidden beneath its porcelain exterior. Little did we know, that truth would change everything we believed about our lives, and the past that seemed determined to catch up with us. But even as fear gnawed at the edges of my sanity, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, not just by the doll, but by something else lurking in the shadows of our home. And I knew that whatever it wasn't going to let us go so easily. As we sat there with the doll, its glassy eyes seemingly watching our every move, a sense of urgency overcame us. We needed answers, and we needed them fast. The address scrawled on the piece of paper had to mean something, and I was determined to find out what. Jessica and I agreed to visit the location first thing in the morning, hoping it would provide some clarity and possibly put our minds at ease. The next morning, we drove out to the address. It led us to a part of town that seemed forgotten by time, filled with old buildings and deserted streets. The address directed us to a rundown antique shop with dusty windows and a faded sign that read, "Curiosities and Oddities." We hesitated before entering, unsure of what we might find inside. But something compelled us forward, as if we were being pulled by an invisible force. Inside, the shop was cluttered with all sorts of strange items. Old clocks ticking out of sync, shelves filled with peculiar trinkets, and the faint smell of incense lingering in the air. An elderly woman sat behind the counter, her eyes as sharp as a hawk's. She looked up as we entered, her gaze lingering on us for a moment longer than seemed comfortable. "What brings you here?" she asked in a voice that sounded as ancient as the shop itself. I showed her the doll, explaining how we found it and the events that had begun to unfold since it entered our lives. As I spoke, her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. She reached out, touching the doll gently, almost reverently, as if she understood the weight it carried. "This doll is part of a collection made by a woman named Eleanor," she explained. Eleanor was known in this town for her abilities. People feared her, thought she was a witch, but she was just a woman with gifts beyond her time. The name Eleanor sent a shiver down my spine. I remembered the diary Jessica had found, the name scribbled across its pages. The old woman continued, revealing that Eleanor had used the doll to trap a spirit, protecting the town from its wrath. But she disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving the doll behind as a vessel for the spirit. "Eleanor had visions," the woman said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She foresaw tragedies and sought to prevent them. The spirit within this doll is that of a child who died long ago, seeking peace. But there are those who would use its power for darkness." Jessica and I exchanged glances, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. The cult that had been stalking us, they must have known about the doll, about its power. And now, they were coming for us. "We need to find a way to free the spirit," Jessica said, her voice filled with determination, "before it's too late." The woman nodded, her expression grave. "There is a ritual, one that requires great courage and sacrifice. But it must be done at the place where the spirit first met its end. Only then can it find peace." Armed with this new knowledge, we left the shop, the weight of our task pressing heavily on our shoulders. We drove back home in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts, pondering the enormity of what lay ahead. It was clear that our lives were entwined with something much larger than we had ever imagined, a legacy of secrets and shadows. Back at the house, we prepared for the ritual. The diary contained instructions, but the language was archaic and difficult to decipher. As night fell, the air grew thick with tension, the atmosphere in the house charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The doll sat on the table, its presence undeniable and foreboding. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting strange shadows that danced across the walls. A low hum resonated through the air, growing louder until it was almost deafening. We heard the front door creak open, the sound echoing down the hallway. Our hearts raced as we realized we were no longer alone. The cult had come. We could see figures moving in the darkness, cloaked in shadows, their intentions clear. They wanted the doll and the power it held, and they would stop at nothing to claim it. We braced ourselves, knowing that we had to act quickly. The spirit within the doll needed us, and we couldn't let it fall into the hands of those who sought to exploit it. Jessica and I took a deep breath, steeling ourselves for what was to come. We recited the words from the diary, our voices merging in a desperate chant that echoed through the house. The air crackled with energy as the ritual began to take hold, drawing the spirit out of its porcelain prison. The cultists surged forward, their voices rising in a discordant chorus, trying to drown out our words. But we held firm, our resolve unwavering. The room grew colder, and the spirit materialized before us, a spectral figure of a young girl with eyes full of sorrow and longing. Time seemed to stand still as we faced the spirit, her presence both haunting and beautiful. Jessica reached out, her hand trembling as she spoke softly to the girl, urging her to find peace. The spirit hesitated, her gaze shifting between us and the cultists, torn between fear and hope. In that moment, I understood what needed to be done. I stepped forward, offering myself as a conduit, a bridge between the worlds. The spirit hesitated, then moved towards me, her essence enveloping me in a chill that pierced my very soul. The cultist screamed in frustration as the spirit dissolved into a shimmer of light, her energy merging with mine. The doll shattered, its pieces scattering across the floor, the connection severed at last. The room filled with a blinding light, and when it faded, the cultists were gone, leaving us standing in silence. Jessica wrapped her arms around me, her relief palpable as we realized that we had succeeded. The spirit was free, and the darkness that had haunted us had been banished. But as we stood there in the aftermath, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The town had its secrets, and we had only scratched the surface. Whatever lay ahead, we knew we would face it together, armed with the knowledge and strength we had gained. In that moment, I knew that our lives would never be the same. The legacy of Eleanor and the spirit of the doll had changed us forever, weaving us into a tapestry of mysteries and shadows that we were only just beginning to understand. And as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I realized that we were ready to face whatever came next. Together, we would unravel the truth hidden in the heart of our new home, guided by the echoes of the past and the promise of the future. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, the events of the previous night replayed in my mind. We had freed the spirit trapped within the doll, but the experience had left me exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Jessica and I sat in silence at the kitchen table, sipping our coffee, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The house felt different, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. But I knew that the darkness that had touched our lives might not be gone for good. Jessica was the first to break the silence. "Do you think it's over?" she asked, her voice tinged with hope and uncertainty. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that we had banished the darkness for good, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The cult's obsession with the doll and Eleanor's legacy had shown me just how deeply the past was rooted in this town. "I don't know," I admitted, meeting her gaze. "We did everything we could, but I feel like there's more to this story, more that we need to uncover." Jessica nodded, her expression determined. She was as committed as I was to getting to the bottom of this, to ensuring that we were truly safe. We spent the rest of the morning cleaning up the remnants of the shattered doll, sweeping away the fragments that had held so much power over us. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was trying to tell us something, its walls whispering secrets that were just out of reach. Later that afternoon, we decided to visit the town's historical society. If there were more clues to be found about Eleanor and the cult, that seemed like the best place to start. The society was housed in an old brick building at the center of town, its halls lined with dusty archives and faded photographs. As we entered, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and history, a tangible reminder of the past. The curator, a man named Mr. Hawthorne, greeted us warmly, his eyes twinkling with curiosity as we explained what we were looking for. He seemed intrigued by our story, and after a moment's hesitation, he led us to a back room filled with boxes of old records and documents. Eleanor was a fascinating figure, Mr. Hawthorne said as he rifled through the stacks of papers. Many stories have been told about her, but most are just that, stories. However, there are a few records here that might help you. He handed us a stack of papers, and we spent hours combing through them, piecing together bits of Eleanor's history. We learned that she had been a prominent member of the town in the early 1900s, known for her herbal remedies and uncanny predictions. But as her reputation grew, so did the fear and suspicion of the townspeople. Rumors of witchcraft began to circulate, and eventually, she became a pariah. One document caught my eye, a faded photograph of Eleanor standing in front of our house. She looked solemn, her eyes piercing even through the worn image. In her hand, she held the very doll that had haunted us, a symbol of the power she had both feared and harnessed. Beneath the photograph was a note, written in elegant script, "The key to the future lies in the past." It was a cryptic message, but it resonated with me, echoing the feeling that had been growing inside me since we first encountered the doll. As we continued to search through the records, we found a mention of a group known as the Order of the Veil, a secretive society that had operated in the shadows of the town for generations. The cult, we realized, was an offshoot of this order, their beliefs rooted in a desire to control the spiritual energy that flowed through the town. The deeper we dug, the more we uncovered about the town's dark history. The Order of the Veil had been responsible for numerous disappearances and tragedies over the years, their influence reaching into every corner of the community. Eleanor, it seemed, had been both a victim and a threat to their power, her gifts a direct challenge to their control. Armed with this knowledge, Jessica and I knew we had to act. The cult was still out there, and the danger they posed was far from over. We needed to find a way to stop them once and for all, to break the cycle of fear and violence that had plagued the town for so long. That night, as we returned home, a sense of urgency fueled our every move. We combed through the diary once more, searching for any additional clues Eleanor might have left behind. As we pored over the pages, a sense of purpose filled me, a determination to see this through to the end. But even as we planned our next steps, a feeling of unease settled over me. The house, though lighter, still held its secrets, and I couldn't shake the sense that we were not alone. The shadows seemed to shift and move in the corners of my vision, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking just out of sight. Jessica must have felt it too, because she suggested we perform another cleansing ritual, one that would reinforce the protection around our home. As we gathered the necessary items, I couldn't help but wonder if we were doing enough, if we were truly prepared for the battle that lay ahead. As we worked, I felt a sense of calm settle over me, the familiarity of the ritual soothing my frayed nerves. Together, we chanted the words from the diary, the energy in the room shifting as we completed each step. The shadows receded, and the air felt lighter, as if we had pushed back the darkness, if only for a moment. But as the final words left our lips, a chill swept through the room, a reminder that the threat was far from over. We were on the brink of something much larger than ourselves, a confrontation that would test everything we had learned. And though the path ahead was uncertain, I knew we had to see it through, to uncover the truth and protect the town from the forces that sought to control it. In that moment, I realized that we were no longer just fighting for ourselves. We were part of a larger battle, a fight to restore balance and light to a town shrouded in darkness. And as I looked at Jessica, her resolve mirrored in my own eyes, I knew that together, we were ready to face whatever came next. The past was no longer just a shadow lurking in the corners of our lives. It was a beacon guiding us toward a future we could shape and protect. That night, I lay in bed unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling as my mind churned with thoughts of what we had discovered. The weight of the knowledge we had uncovered felt heavy on my chest, but beneath that heaviness was a steely resolve. The cult, the Order of the Veil, was still out there. Their presence lingered like a shadow over everything, threatening to darken our lives once more if we didn't act quickly. Jessica lay next to me, her breathing even but restless, as if she, too, was caught in the same web of thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away from us, that the cult was planning something that would soon come to pass. Just as I was drifting into an uneasy sleep, I was startled awake by the faintest sound, a creak in the floorboards downstairs. I froze, listening intently. Jessica stirred beside me, her eyes snapping open. We both knew we weren't alone in the house. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, signaling Jessica to stay where she was. She shook her head, determination etched across her face, and insisted on coming with me. Together, we crept down the stairs, every creak and groan of the old wood magnified in the stillness of the night. We paused at the bottom of the stairs, listening for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to ripple, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up as a cold draft swept through the room. I could sense it, something malevolent, lurking just out of sight, watching us. As we moved toward the living room, a faint glow caught my attention. The light was coming from the remains of the porcelain doll, still lying where we had left it after the ritual. The pieces were subtly vibrating, humming with a low, ominous energy. Jessica and I exchanged a look of understanding, knowing the doll was still somehow connected to the spirit world, a residual link that refused to sever completely. Suddenly, a whisper broke the silence, a voice echoing from the shadows, speaking in hushed, unintelligible tones. I turned sharply, trying to pinpoint the source, but the room was empty, save for us. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "It's them," Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're here." As if in response, the whispers grew louder, building into a cacophony that filled the room. I could feel the energy in the air, thick and oppressive, pressing down on us. The cult was trying to breach the protection we had set up, using the doll as a conduit to reach us. We had no choice. We had to confront them and put an end to their attempts to reclaim the power they sought so desperately. With a newfound determination, we gathered the pieces of the doll, wrapping them carefully in cloth to contain the energy within. The ritual had released the spirit, but its remnants were still tied to the doll, and we couldn't risk leaving it behind. Armed with the fragments, we made our way to the basement, where the ritual space still held the echoes of Eleanor's magic. The air was cold and still, the darkness closing in around us as we prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Jessica began chanting the incantation from the diary, her voice steady and clear, echoing off the stone walls. I joined in, feeling the power of the words resonate through me, strengthening our resolve. The energy in the room shifted, pulsing with a rhythm that matched our chants. Suddenly, a loud crash from above interrupted our focus. The front door slammed open, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the house. The cultists had forced their way in, determined to stop us from completing the ritual. Panic surged through me, but I pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. Jessica and I continued the incantation, our voices rising above the chaos as we poured all our strength into the ritual. The fragments of the doll began to glow, a bright, blinding light emanating from within as the energy built to a crescendo. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right outside the basement door. I could hear their voices now, chanting their own incantations, trying to drown out our efforts. The air was electric with tension, the clash of wills and power creating a storm of energy around us. As the basement door burst open, the light from the doll fragments exploded outward, enveloping the room in a searing brilliance that left me momentarily blinded. I heard shouts of surprise and fear from the cultists, their voices mingling with the roar of the energy released by the ritual. When the light faded, I found myself standing in silence, the basement empty except for Jessica and me. The cultists were gone, vanished as if they had never been there. The doll fragments lay scattered on the floor, their power finally extinguished, the link to the spirit world severed once and for all. Jessica and I looked at each other, the relief palpable in the air. We had done it. The threat that had loomed over us was gone, the cult defeated and their plans thwarted. But as we stood there in the aftermath, I couldn't help but wonder if we had truly seen the last of them. The Order of the Veil was ancient and resilient, and though we had won this battle, the war might still rage on. Yet, for now, we were safe, and the house felt peaceful once more. As we made our way back upstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end, but a new beginning. The secrets we had uncovered had changed us, tied us to this town and its mysterious past in ways we were only beginning to understand. Together, Jessica and I would face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge and courage we had gained. The future was uncertain, but we were ready to meet it head-on, guided by the lessons of the past and the strength of our bond. And as we stepped into the light of a new day, I knew that we would always be stronger together, no matter what shadows lingered on the horizon. The days that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. The once foreboding shadows in our house had receded, leaving behind a sense of calm and tranquility. Jessica and I finally felt as though we could breathe again, free from the haunting presence that had threatened to unravel our lives. But even as peace returned, I knew it was only a matter of time before we would have to face the town's lingering mysteries once more. Our experience had left us with more questions than answers. Though the cultists were gone, their ties to the Order of the Veil still lingered like a stain upon the town. I couldn't shake the feeling that this ancient group was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. We needed to be ready, to understand what exactly we were up against, and to protect ourselves and the town from further harm. Jessica suggested we reach out to Mr. Hawthorne at the Historical Society again, hoping he might have more information about the Order. I agreed, knowing that the key to defeating them for good lay somewhere in the tangled web of history and myth that surrounded Eleanor and the town. When we arrived at the Historical Society, Mr. Hawthorne greeted us with a warm smile. His eyes held a mixture of curiosity and concern, as though he was both eager and wary of what we might uncover next. We explained the events of the previous nights and our desire to learn more about the Order of the Veil. He listened intently, nodding as he considered our words. "I've been digging into some old records since you were last here," Mr. Hawthorne said, leading us back into the room where we had spent so many hours poring over documents. The Order is mentioned in a few places, but their activities were always shrouded in secrecy. He handed us a thick leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. The cover bore a symbol, a veil encircling a star, that sent a shiver down my spine. The book contained entries from a local judge who had presided over several cases involving members of the Order. The accounts were chilling, detailing disappearances and strange occurrences linked to their rituals. As we read through the book, a pattern began to emerge. The Order had been systematically targeting individuals with connections to Eleanor, seeking to harness or destroy their gifts. They believed that the town was a nexus of spiritual energy, and that controlling it would grant them power beyond imagining. Eleanor was a guardian of sorts, Mr. Hawthorne explained. Her abilities were seen as both a blessing and a curse. The Order wanted that power for themselves, and they would stop at nothing to obtain it. Jessica's face paled as she read, the weight of our family's history settling upon her shoulders. We realized that Eleanor's legacy was not just one of fear and suspicion, but also of protection and strength. It was up to us to continue her work, to safeguard the town from those who would seek to exploit its secrets. As we left the Historical Society, a new resolve took root within us. We were no longer just victims of the past, but active participants in shaping the future. The fight against the Order of the Veil was far from over, but we were determined to see it through. Over the next few weeks, we focused on strengthening our understanding of Eleanor's abilities. Jessica spent hours practicing meditation and honing her instincts, guided by the insights from Eleanor's diary. We established a network of allies within the town, people who had experienced the Order's influence firsthand and were eager to stand against them. One night, as we sat together in the living room, a knock at the door interrupted our quiet evening. I felt a pang of apprehension, wondering if the Order had returned. But when I opened the door, I was surprised to find a young woman standing there, her expression earnest and hopeful. "Are you Jessica and Michael?" she asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. We nodded, inviting her inside. She introduced herself as Emily, a descendant of one of Eleanor's closest friends. She had heard about our efforts and wanted to help. "The Order took something from my family," Emily explained, her eyes filled with determination. "I want to make sure they can't hurt anyone else." Her words resonated deeply with us, reaffirming our commitment to the cause. Emily's arrival felt like a turning point, a sign that we were not alone in this fight. Together, we began to piece together a plan to dismantle the Order's hold on the town once and for all. As the weeks turned into months, our small group grew. We uncovered more about the Order's activities, mapping out their network and identifying their key members. We worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and preparing to expose their deeds to the wider community. The town slowly began to awaken to the truth, as whispers of the Order's misdeeds spread like wildfire. People who had once turned a blind eye to the strange happenings around them now stood with us, ready to defend their homes and their families. Finally, The day came when we were ready to confront the Order head-on. With the support of the town behind us, we set out to bring their shadowy reign to an end. As we stood together, united by a shared purpose, I felt a sense of pride and hope. The battle against the Order was fierce, but our resolve never wavered. With every step we took, the power of the town's collective spirit grew stronger, driving back the darkness that had held us captive for so long. In the end, it was not just our abilities or our knowledge that defeated the Order, but the strength of the community we had built. Together, we reclaimed the town's future, breaking the cycle of fear and oppression that had haunted it for generations. As the dust settled and peace returned once more, I knew that this was just the beginning. Our journey had forged bonds that would endure, and our story was now a part of the town's legacy, a testament to the power of courage, unity, and hope. And as Jessica and I stood side by side, looking out over the town that we now called home, I realized that we had finally found what we had been searching for all along. A place where we truly belonged, where the shadows of the past had been banished, and where the light of the future shone brightly upon us all.